Imagine you went to the doctor today and you were given 4 months to live. What would the next 4 months of your life look like? Or had you known you were going to get that diagnosis, what would the last 4 months, 4 years, 40 years of your life look like? After the death of a friend, Sebastian Terry decided to create a list of 100 goals that he wanted to accomplish before he died. Now, some of these goals were just bucket list items like jumping out of an airplane naked or running with the bulls. Other items on the list were a bit more impactful, raising money for a charity or buying a stranger lunch. And then there's this other set of goals in the list of 100 that were a bit more, I'd call them introspective. For example, living on a desert island for a full week, not speaking for a full week, or living as a homeless person for a full week. Regardless of whichever category these goals fell in, this list of 100 ultimately became way more impactful than Sebastian ever could have dreamed when he initially created the list.
Quite frankly, it's kind of unusual.
It's quite Franklin.
Got it. Quite Franklin.
The reason why I wanted to talk to you is because when you made this list of 100 things, it's funny how applicable this is to other people. For example, I'll apply this to myself. You woke up when I read your book and it was this like moment where the realization set in when you were running your business and you're like, this is not my dream, right? Like I'm married to this business sun up to sundown, which is part of the reason why I never opened a martial arts school. And I was not in the middle of my career, but towards the tail end of my career. And I kept telling myself there are all these things in life I wanted to do. And I kept saying, well, one day I'm going to do this and one day I'm going to do that. And one day. And especially as an athlete, like you have very limited time. So there's this pressure of like, well, I got to get it while the getting is good. You know, I'm healthy, I'm young, my earning window here is small. So I need to take advantage of that. And it started getting towards the tail end of my career where my career was just really mentally beginning to wear on me. And at that point in time, I finally just decided there was just something that was like, one day is today. So I took some time off and it was like simultaneously, I started doing a bunch of different things. I was learning Portuguese. I was learning how to wakeboard. I started learning the drums. And funny thing is, I always said that when I was done fighting, I wanted to travel. And I'd done some travel with fighting, but I mean, you see the inside of arenas and that's about it. You don't actually get to appreciate the places you're going to. Yeah. When I was reading your book, I thought, man, this guy and I have a lot in common in this respect. And people wouldn't think that somebody like me who is pursuing their passion in life would run into that kind of problem. Like you typically think of those kind of people that are, the grocery store worker or the executive who's in this like 9-to-5 job that's running the rat race and sitting in traffic every day. And I wasn't that guy, but still had those same feelings of kind of, I don't know, not emptiness necessarily, but I was unsatiated. I'll put it that way.
I'm sure you and I both talk about this a lot, but we always get comfort's such a big killer for us.
Oh yeah.
To step out of that comfort zone, to try something it just seems like such a daunting thing, and we overcomplicate it. And then we think the implications of failure are life-threatening and we don't do anything. And yeah, I've never met a person yet who has chosen to like follow their heart or follow that little voice that they hear in the inside of their head, who's then gone on and said, oh, I regretted doing that. Everyone who does it is, always over, like they sort of outperform their expectations of themselves, because our default is we're not good enough, but we are. You just have to try. So I'm so happy to hear that and that you got to travel so much.
I've kind of always been this way. And I mean, I took I don't know if you know, originally I used to be a math teacher. Like I was a high school math teacher.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I was 4 years into this career and I was like, man, is this the rest of my life? Like 26 more years of this till I retire type of thing. And I always tell people I love teaching and I love math, but I hated teaching math. And that makes sense if you think about it. But then, I pursue this passion of martial arts. When you get into a discipline like that, it's about the pursuit of excellence, so to speak, the excellence of technique, the embetterment of yourself as a person, things like discipline. And as time goes on, it becomes more about the career rather than this pursuit of excellence that you were originally on this journey for. So it's amazing how even in life, when you're pursuing a passion, it can turn into that same feeling of, I don't know, inadequacy, or like I said, I'll use the word, I was not satiated with that. At one point in my career, I was like, there's more than this. And so, yeah, I woke up. So when I was reading your book, I'm like, this is amazing. And a lot of advice that I give people on a daily basis that when I'm talking to people is like, it's the very things that you talk about in your list. How was it that you actually developed this list originally to begin with?
First of all, I'm so thrilled that you read my book. It's awesome.
It was a really good book. And I'm going to say this. Actually, no, I take it back. It was a terrible book. And here's the reason why. Whatever happened to J-Lock?
Oh, dude. Wow. My gosh.
And you reset the goal from 10,000 to 100,000 for camp quality.
Yeah.
What happened with that?
These are unanswered in the book.
Exactly.
Oh,
terrible. Yeah, I'm telling you, you had these cliffhangers in there. I'm reading the book. I'm waiting. I'm like, come on, man. And then I get to the end and I'm like, this book sucked.
That's one of the nicest bits of feedback I've ever had about
You're welcome, man. I mean that in the most complimented way possible.
So to answer those questions, so for people who have no idea kind of what I'm doing.
Give the background on this.
Yeah, I have a list of 100 things, which I've been chasing. I created a list, kind of like a bucket list of things that I hoped would bring a smile to my face. And I've been doing that for about 14 years. So I have not finished. I've done 76 items from the list. And of course, like it's very it's accidentally become much bigger than just one person in his list. And that's the beauty of community, etc. And we can talk about that too. But to answer those questions quickly, I guess when I upped the ante to $100,000 for Camp Quality, which is a kids' cancer charity in Australia, by the time the book published, I don't know if I had got there or not. But so to answer your question, we got there. So we raised $100,000 for them. Then I decided to raise $100,000 for another charity. So I chose Alzheimer's Australia because my mum has younger onset of Alzheimer's. She got it at about 57, and so now she's mid 60s and she's in a home, and it's a tough one. So we raised $100,000 for those guys, which is fantastic. And then we've raised, I don't know exactly, maybe about $50,000 for Make-A-Wish Foundation. We raised $50,000 for another charity. I can't remember the name of them, but so that's ongoing. So we got Camp Quality.
Okay, you got to the 100K with Camp Quality.
Yeah, and then J-Lock. So J-Lock, for those who don't know, number 11 on my list, or it might have been number 12, was to visit an inmate on death row. And the story of how I got there is also pretty funny, but J-Lock is the name. James was the inmate I visited, and J-Lock is his nickname. So J-Lock had a very interesting case, and I don't know how much detail you want, but basically there was,
you can give all the detail. I don't know how much detail you want to give, or if you want to leave cliffhangers so that people are interested in reading the book.
I'm happy to share all. Well, but basically, probably people are thinking, why would you want to do that? So a lot of my list is, I was very sheltered growing up. I didn't really have experience, and I didn't know myself. And so I just wanted to meet people, put myself in circumstances and situations that I never had been in before. And I came from a sort of very clean upbringing. I didn't know anyone who had got into trouble, let alone be in jail. So on my list went meet someone who's been in jail. And I thought, well, death row is probably the most serious version of that. So I Googled death row pen pals. First page was met with hundreds, if not thousands of people on death row who all wanted to chat to people. So I wrote a letter to this one guy called J-Lock, and I just wondered if he'd even get it. And 2 weeks later, I got a response from this guy. We spoke for 12 months back and forth, handwritten letters. And then eventually he said, come and visit me. And I, of course, said yes. So I flew to Oklahoma, this place called McAllister, this tiny little place. I remember driving there, and there was a dead raccoon on the side of the road. It was the first raccoon I'd ever seen. Anyway, and I met this guy. And if you imagine, actually my book that you mentioned, that I didn't plan on writing that book. I wanted to write a kid's book. Number 100 on my list is to write a kid's book. The publisher got in touch with me and said, we want you to write a story about your list. The reason they got in touch is because they saw on my website this particular story. And it's just so layered. But, I drove up to this huge penitentiary. It was surrounded by shiny wires and all that sort of stuff. And when I got into the reception area, I guess you'd call it, I had to give them my phone and my belt and shoelaces and all this weird stuff. And then I went 4 levels underground and just sat opposite this guy, J-Lock, who I'd been chatting to via letters for 12 months. And there's, like off a movie, a window in front of me, reinforced bars, a telephone on the side. And he came in, picked up the phone, and we kind of fist pumped in the middle. And then I chatted to him for 5.5 hours, and it was absolutely incredible. His story was basically him and his girlfriend. His girlfriend had a baby. It wasn't his. They were together. And without getting too intricate about it, the baby died. The baby died one morning when one or the other of them were in the house, and it looked as though the baby might have got shaken to death or beaten, which is obviously horrendous. He denied doing it. She denied doing it. It was ultimately a case of, well, who did it? And they both got punished. So she went to a maximum security prison, no parole. He went to death row and always fought his innocence. And eventually his death row sentence got turned over because they were punishing them both for the same thing, which I don't think was allowed or something like that. And he's now off death row. He's still alive. He's also in a maximum security penitentiary on a life thing with no parole. And I mean, we spoke 5.5 hours. So we spoke a lot about, my background, his background, and, he's got a colorful past for sure. And funny part is he sent me a Facebook message years later. And I was like, what? How's he got Facebook? And he gave me his phone number. And I just called him from my breakfast table in Australia where I was living at the time. And he picked up. And I was like, hey, J-Lock, what are you up to? And we just had this chat. And then I was like, oh, no, he's got my number. So he had my number. And anyway, yeah, we became Facebook friends. And I just saw the stuff he was posting on Facebook. And I was like, I'm not friends with this guy.
How did he have a phone in a maximum security prison?
I think you can pay for anything, it turns out, in prison.
Well, yeah.
You can get all the things. So that was just something. But yeah, it was just funny because I was living on the beach and I was just looking out at the surf and it was sunny and birds were chirping. And I just called him and then, I was like brought back to this reality of where he was. And then, I probably shouldn't have called it. I should have blocked my number. But anyway, we don't stay in touch, but he's still alive. Yeah.
Or you could have borrowed a friend's phone that you really is like not a real good friend, or maybe somebody that crossed you the wrong way type of thing.
Yeah.
How did you choose the items on your list to begin with? Because for listeners out there, some of the items on your list are kind of bucket list things that are, crazy antics like skydive naked or running with the bulls. And then there's some other things like, for example, me going to a maximum security penitentiary to have a chat with an inmate or to help somebody or to buy a stranger lunch. Like there's like do good items on your list as well. So when you made this list up, it's not all do good stuff. It's not all exactly bucket list kind of items as you would typically think of them. It's a cool mixture of stuff that you have in there.
For sure. I think the term bucket list, people think jumping out of planes and climbing Everest or, getting in a UFC fight or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think all those things can be on there, but I think if people really sat down and thought about what it is they want to do, I mean, I give plenty of workshops on this stuff and I don't want to just give you sort of some canned answer, but at first, in honesty, like I'd lost a friend. I don't think I'd mentioned that.
You did mention it in the book.
Again, for anyone who's listening, I lost a friend. I was 25, he was 24. And that moment was the moment I just took a step back and looked at my life and I realized I was really unhappy. And that in fact, my friend lived a life to me, which was kind of inspirational in that he lived a very values driven life. He was just very happy with the things he did, his friends, his family, beaches, surfing, couple of beers, whatever. And I just realized if I died today, I'd be super unhappy. So that's what the list became. So I just kind of sat down and just wondered, well, what are the things that I would do if I had a second chance at life? And just all this random stuff came out. And as you say, certainly selfish stuff on there. There's certainly stuff about giving back or, creating impact, if you will. There's more emotional stuff. There's physical stuff. And I just kind of, at first it was like a shotgun approach. I just went, and there was just this list of things. Now, obviously, like almost 13 years on, retrospectively, in our workshops, we help people create these lists. We don't say that. We don't say just go for it. We do a whole process where step one is giving yourself permission. Step two is reflecting on your life, writing a eulogy. How did I show up? Was I good in these areas? Where did I overlook? And then if you do that process, you're able to, if you imagine like a bicycle wheel and the spokes of that wheel give it structure, the question sort of boils down to, well, what are your spokes? Like, what are the most important aspects of your life? And we find that there are 12 commonly shared spokes from physical health, mental health, financial security, key relationships, love, creativity, travel, adventure, blah, blah, blah. And people have between 7 and 8 spokes on average. So that's kind of the basis of the list. Like the goals are fantastic. And a lot of people, to be honest, a lot of people who know of me probably know of me because I'm the guy who like married a stranger in Las Vegas, or I'm the guy who delivered a baby, or I'm the guy who, I don't know, walked across France, or those. But that's kind of like the shiny stuff. If you imagine an iceberg, like it's the stuff below the water, like that understanding of your values, that kind of the understanding of what your spokes are. That's kind of where you start with the list. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. At the age of 24, let me ask you, like, I don't know, kind of not really sure what my question is. At the age of 24 versus this age right now, because you created the list at 24, 25.
25, yeah.
Yeah, 25. So at the age of 25, and if you were to create the list now, would those lists be the same had you not had those experiences? Like if you were say you had a friend pass away now and it onset this thing at this age, do you think the lists would be similar?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So no, the list would be different. And the list is different. In fact, right now I'm reviewing the remaining 24 goals to see if they still resonate with me. And to answer the question, we change as people. You're very different to what you were 10 years ago. And in 10 years, you'll be very different again. And, same for individuals, same for families, same for business, values and things that are those spokes do change over time. Not day to day, but more so maybe every 6 months, year, 3 years. So it's important we check in. So at the beginning for me, when I was 25, I'd live a sheltered life. I felt like I hadn't experienced anything. So a lot of my stuff was adventure and liberation and freedom and getting out there and, just doing kind of like wild, wacky, adrenaline junkie stuff. And now I've done a lot of that and I don't feel like I need that so much anymore. I really enjoy the aspects of, creating stuff for like, mastery of goals, giving back, supporting others. Not to sound too cliche, but I really care about that stuff. And so, this is an example. Yesterday, I changed an item on my list. And it's interesting. So I have a list that you've read. It's in a book. But, the truth is, of course, it's different. So a new goal on my list speaks to key relationships. I didn't care about relationships before. There isn't really anything in there that's too specific to people. But I've been spending a lot of time in America away from family. And they're becoming more important to me. And my little sister, Pascal, I love her dearly. We went on a trip to Ireland together. I was doing a talk in Dublin and she came along about 2 years ago. And we had such a good time. And we decided we should do this more often. So yesterday, officially, I changed an item on my list to start a tradition. So that's new. I would not have cared about that 10 years ago. So now the tradition specifically is annual trip with my sister.
See, I think, listen, I'm just going to give you some advice here. I think you're cheating. I think you have to stick to the original 100 and then you have to complete that 100 and then you need to make a new list of 100.
I take your point. And the things on there that don't resonate so much with me anymore are not, I think it'd be fun doing them, no doubt, but there are things that are more important to me. So, yeah. I don't know how serious you were about that, but no, I would debate that. I would say that an issue that I hear a lot from our community and businesses again and what have you, is that a lot of people achieve these goals that they set years ago and they finally get to them and they're like, they feel underwhelmed and they wonder why. And if they were, through conversations we have with them, they somehow understand after a process that, that goal doesn't really relate back to a spoke that's apparent for me anymore. So, I don't know. I'd have fun doing the remainder of the current goals, but I think things change, and I think we have to be agile as people. We have to adapt completely.
On a serious note, I was kind of poking fun, but on a serious note, when you look at your list, the cool thing about your list is, like you said, there's a lot of selfish things on there. Running with the bulls, marry a stranger in Vegas, bet $1,000 on a roulette table, and the list goes on. Skydive naked, whatever it is. But what's interesting to me is that individually, some of these goals are selfish per se, but collectively what ended up happening with this is that it's these selfish goals, and you actually became an example for people who get boxed into life, right? Who are afraid to, who are not comfortable being uncomfortable, so to speak. They sit in their financial security. And it's like when you see somebody who runs with the bulls and who goes and gets married for 24 hours in Vegas, who, whatever it is, whatever crazy thing, crashing a red carpet in Cannes, it's like these things collectively become impactful for people, even though individualistically they may individualistically be selfish, but that's what started happening. And this created a kind of following. So you became an example for what people would want to be, so to speak.
Yeah. And it happened by complete mistake. I didn't think anyone would know about this. I never thought that I'd be doing a podcast with you. I never thought I'd have a book to, it was all accidental. I purely and simply decided I wanted to be happy, try and become happier. And I just took off. I dropped everything in my life to pursue this list. The rest has just been a wonderful adventure that I have not really been in control of. I think what happened initially is that a lot of people saw themselves in me, not necessarily skydiving naked or whatever.
Well, that's what I said. That's what I said at the beginning of the conversation. I said, there's some commonality here because I went through the same process more than once in my life, might I add.
Yeah. And good for you, because not everyone does it. But if they see an example, a Rich Franklin pivoting and doing something completely different and growing and evolving, I think people go, well, if he can do it, why can't I? And it's such an important point. They're exactly right. So I think ultimately we're all so similar. I think we all want to engage with something of meaning in our life, in the workplace, out of the workplace, with friends, with family, in the community, by yourself. We all want to, have a sense of purpose. And I think if we end up creating goals that do give us a sense of purpose and we commit to them over time, I think that we end up growing. You really grow as an individual. And the best part is, and this is just what I found personally, is by me growing personally, which I have, I've been able to connect with not just myself, but other people. And that's one thing. And the other thing I just want to say before I forget, I used to say this on stage a lot, but when you get into a plane, they'll tell you, an oxygen mask will fall down from the ceiling.
Bro, when I heard you say this, I've used this example, I've used this in this scenario so many times with people. This is some great advice because I use it for the stay-at-home mom that is, intertwined, like running kids to practice all day long, people that just don't. So go on and finish because this is great advice.
In an emergency, oxygen masks will fall from the ceiling, put yours on first before helping anybody else. And on some airlines, they will say before helping your own children. And, it's kind of obvious the tie into life. You have to look after yourself. If you don't, you will not be capable to be productive or helpful or supportive to anybody else in your life. And, this word selfishness, it's such an insult, you're selfish. I disagree. I think being selfish leads ultimately to being selfless. If you have your oxygen mask on, put it on. Yeah, that's selfish. It's healthy. And when you're okay, then you can do all the lovely things. And what I find is that people are one or the other. I mean, you mentioned, mothers being one example of a group, and I'm sure you find the same. But I hear from a lot of mothers who, of course, are selfless and give themselves entirely to their children. And what a wonderful thing. But I just got off. I did an event last week in Atlanta, and a mother said this to me again. She said, my son's just left home. I've given my life, the last 20 years or whatever to him being who he is. And now I have no idea who I am. And that's not good.
No.
People are either selfish or selfless, and being one or the other, whichever, is unhealthy. You need to have a balance of both.
Well, and I agree. And I find that people, using the mom scenario, for example, I find that people that are selfless, oftentimes they're not operating on all cylinders. In essence, like, you're when you're not taking care of yourself, you're only outputting, say, at 80% of what your maximum potential is. And it's like, whatever that is, whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself, I don't know, get away to a quiet place, read a book, go get your workouts in, some time meditating, skydive naked, whatever it is for you on a regular basis, like do something like that, because if not, then you're just not giving your maximum potential to other people.
Yeah. And if you go back to that wheel of life with the spokes, one of those wheels is impact for many people, giving back. And that includes everything from donating to charity to bringing up children to, supporting your parents as they get older. So that's just one spoke. And if you only concentrate on that, your wheel in general is going to be super weak. you need to look at the other things. Like you say, going to the gym because another spoke is physical fitness, let's say. So it's a very holistic approach. And so I don't really use the term bucket list because that's suggestive of, crazy mayhem, and that's not what this is. We find that people who start their lists with us, many of their things are create healthier boundaries in my life. Say no to things, create more me time, meditate. A lot of it is kind of internal work, and a list it's holistic and it's different for everyone. And also not just to put it on mothers. I mean, there are plenty of men, obviously, as well.
For sure.
This entrepreneurial pursuit, which is something. I'm in LA, right? And you are an entrepreneur. We are, I suppose. I don't know, but anyway, there's this idea of grind. People, people working so hard for the business. They've got to stay up till 2 a.m. doing the things, whatever the things are, and then they're exhausted and they've got no time for family and friends, and everyone's unhappy and they wilt away and they're unhealthy. Sure, the business might do well. They've completely forgotten about themselves. So, again, it's this idea of balance, which is hard. It's harder than you'd think, but it's possible.
It's all these people going back to the original question that you asked yourself. If that executive died at that moment in his life, would he have looked at his life and said, yep, wouldn't change a thing? Or would he, in essence, kind of turn things around? Yeah, I'll talk to people, and I run into people oftentimes because, like I said, this has kind of been my life. Like if there's something where I don't like feeling boxed in, like I'm trapped the way that you felt at a young age. And so even when my fight career, when I started to kind of feel that way, I'm like, man, I need to change some things. I need to do some things. And I don't know how long that transitionary period was for me personally, where because you get that thought at first, and then I don't know what that length of time was for you when you were running your business and you're like, I don't like this situation I'm in, until you were at that dinner or whatever and you finally decided to pull the trigger on something, right? Like, but there's time and it takes everybody to transition. But, I tell people, because people are always, they're afraid to make that change. And I just tell them, I said, what if you woke up today and you went to the doctor and you had an outcome, like you had a cancer diagnosis, and they said, you got 4 months to live. I'm like, what would you do with the last 4 months of your life? Or what would you have done with the last 4 years of your life, knowing that was coming, right? And, when you put things in that perspective, it's like people still have trouble changing, but if they were in that situation, they would ultimately be forced to change,
I think it's sort of endemic with humans that we wait for a bad moment, a really bad moment to take a step back and go, hang on, is this good for me? We hear it all the time. It's someone who is diagnosed with an illness, someone who goes through a traumatic relationship or professional change, losing a friend close to them, almost losing their own life. And it's those people that go and, climb the mountain, write the book, go back to school, say, I love you, say, I'm sorry, etc. And we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait. I've got this, I could talk to you for hours. I really enjoy this conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
A friend of mine, his name's Tal, flamboyantly gay air flight attendant, based here in LA. And at the age, it was like early 30s. I think he was 32. He got diagnosed with a late stage cancer. The doctor said, we can't do anything for you. Say your goodbyes. So Tal, T-A-L, thought, well, geez, like that sucks. And as he was processing this on the way home, he decided to prioritize the one goal he'd always sort of forgotten to, and that was to go on a global shopping spree. So instead of going home or going to a friend's place to say goodbye, because he had 6 months left, as the doctors told him, he went to a few different banks and somehow really quickly got some credit cards because he had no money. And he wanted to go on this global shopping spree. That was his goal. So a couple of weeks later, he takes off and spends the last 6 months of his life traveling around the world, everywhere, Paris, Milan, Tokyo, New York, wherever, Sydney, Cincinnati, Ohio. And he buys everything. He has suits and hats and watches and shoes, whatever, everything. And he accumulates a debt of $90,000 as I want to say 32-year-old, because he had 6 months left. And of course, he didn't regret that. The funny part of the story is, you might be able to guess, he survived. Yeah, he's in his 60s now. He's in huge debt, and but he's really well dressed at every single event that he goes to, which is awesome. And I said to him, "Do you regret that?" And he said, "No. The moment I was told my life was in jeopardy was the first moment that I ever gave myself permission to consider myself." consider what living truly was. And well, I would say that like adversity in life, it gives us perspective, gifts us perspective, you know, whether it's a personal thing, a health thing, or whether it's a business thing, it might go under. You start thinking from a different point of view, and you actually ask important questions. What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my business? What am I doing with love? Am I loving myself? And if you come to an answer very quickly, fantastic, but there's no rush. And anyway, all that to say, it's interesting that we tend to wait for a bad moment to make a good decision for ourselves. We don't have to. And that's such an important point.
You know, this list of 100, it wasn't about money for you to begin with either, because going back to the money situation and Tal getting the credit cards, when you started this, you had no money really. Would you start with $2,000 from your business or something of that nature? I
think I had 8,000 Australian dollars that I ripped from my business that made no money.
And the first thing that you did was fly to Vegas. That was the first thing on your list?
Well, there was a bit of a, what happened is, yes, initially, as soon as my friend had passed, I flew straight to Las Vegas. I called my bank up, and I thought they owed me money, and it turned out they didn't, of course, because my maths is awful. And the bank manager said, we can extend your credit line if you like. And I said, yes, please. So I took that and I flew straight to Las Vegas, all on my credit card. Married a stranger in Vegas, found a stranger on night one, married her the next day. Very odd story. And then I flew home, and it was never been about the money. I've never had the money. And then I suppose I forgot about my list for a few years. I kind of conformed back into society because I thought, well, okay, I've got a list. I've done one thing, but what is that? So I kind of got scared and went back to starting a business, which was this inflatable movie screen events company. A bit weird. Anyway, a couple of years beyond that, I then broke down in a cab, as you've read, and I just realized how unhappy I had become. And I wondered why. And I just kind of remembered that I had this list laying about, and I got that list out of my drawer and thought, I have to do that. That is my secret to being happy, I think. And so as soon as the business was paid off, as I said, I ripped out $8,000 or $9,000 and then just took off. And found out that $8,000 to $9,000 Australian doesn't go very far, which is quite funny.
Reading this story, it was a lot like, it reminded me of, have you seen the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
So it's like he says yes to everything in the movie, and then all these things end up coming in handy, right? I mean, he learns Chinese, and then he uses that in the shop. He learns how to play guitar, and then he, pulls that guy off the roof that's committing suicide. Like everything that he ends up saying yes to ends up becoming this tool in life that he uses later. And it just, as I was reading your story, it was almost as if there was some sort of parallel connection to that. I saw one of the pictures on your website. It said, yes, man. I don't know if it was any relation to that or whatever, but that's what it reminded me of, because you just were like, all right, I don't have money, so I'm going to fly here and deliver this baby. And then the original lady that was, that you were going to deliver, had to go into emergency surgery, and that didn't work out. And somebody else stepped up, and it's just like, it's just funny, and things worked out. They just continue to keep working out. And it's not like you had the cash to make these things happen.
No, I tell you what I'm loving about our chat, by the way, is because a lot of people just talk about things on my list. Oh, how did this happen? But what we're talking about, I think, is really important stuff. I think it's the far more important stuff. And so, to support what you just said, look, I completely agree. There was never a plan. I just had these goals. That was it. And I committed to each single one. I had an action plan and committed to it. I believe that if you identify goals that are very meaningful to you, and research suggests the same thing. If you commit to a purpose-driven goal, we become infinitely more creative, more motivated. Obstacles that would have stopped us in the past, we actually become far more able to navigate them. Our clarity, our decision-making process goes up. We have more confidence, more a sense of self-efficacy, all if we have things that are meaningful to us as goals, again, in any aspect of our life. And I think that's kind of what happened. I just became incredibly motivated, which is a personal thing, but also the world sort of conspires to these people. You hear we're here to do good. The world wants us to win. And I know it's hard for some people to kind of believe that if they haven't experienced it. But I don't know of many people who have committed fully to the things that they love, and they haven't taken steps towards it, if not achieved it. And people are good. Everything I've done from my list, it isn't because I'm special or I'm brave or I'm skillful or whatever. It's all because of other people. It's because of community.
That was the message with the whole thing. You for example, like hitchhiking from New York to LA.
Yeah.
You can't do that without the aid of other people. Right.
Yeah.
And so you're
quite literally.
Yeah. You're completely dependent on, individuals, society, whatever it is that you're dependent on. And at every stage of this thing, it was like something stepped up and made it possible for you. It wasn't you just saying, oh, well, I'm going to hitchhike. And for example, if you had infinite resources to do something like this as you're hitchhiking, if you couldn't catch a ride, then you're just like, well, I'll just get a hotel at this place and I'll take a cab, or I'll Uber to the next town or whatever. And you couldn't. It's like, if you didn't find a ride, you were stuck.
You know that the burning of the boat philosophy? Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, Coronado, his troops, they were like, let's go back home. Everybody was getting sick and they wanted to get back on the ships. I'm pretty sure it was Coronado. And he ordered his lead ranking man to burn the boats in the bay that night. And when the boats were gone, they were stuck. It's like, well, now you have to survive.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that. So I just knew of the term.
Oh yeah.
It's that if you commit to something, you're like, I'm going to absolutely do this. We're far more capable. I've said it before, but we're far more capable than we give ourselves credit for. And so, yeah, people have shown up. We call a lot of things coincidence or luck or fate. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it, things happen if you're fully committed to it. And so, that baby story, I missed the birth of this lady because she had an emergency delivery. The baby was healthy, by the way. And a TV show popped up and said, hey, do you want to do an interview on TV about what you're up to? And I said, okay. And then on that TV show, a morning breakfast show, I just did a national plea. And I thought, well, hang on, two things conspired. I had an audience, people wanted to listen. And I said, well, I may as well use this as well. So I said, is there anyone who's pregnant? I actually said, if there's anyone 5 centimeters dilated or more, email me. and I got 10 people who emailed me, and I delivered a baby. I delivered a baby within 4 hours of getting within 12 hours of doing that interview. The world shows up. I mean, money as well. Like, it's a really important point. I ran out of that $8,000. I started using my credit card irresponsibly, but that's where I was in my life. And then I got offered to write a book, and I got paid for it. And then from that, people started asking me to speak on stages. And so now I'm very grateful to, I speak all around the world about this. And I'm fortunate and grateful again to be paid for that. And of course, it's very hard to say to try and teach someone and say, well, you know what, just go for it and it will all work out. Sometimes it doesn't, but you've got to put yourself out there. I truly believe that. And I don't know. I'm very optimistic about the world. I'm very optimistic about people. I think people really, again, going back to this idea, people would read my list and I'd get a million offers. Hey, we can help you do this. We can help you do this. People are good, and we're all here for each other. And I'm so glad that I get to, with 100 things now, kind of support other people. It's wonderful.
So let me ask you this. This can be interpreted in many different ways. What was the most difficult item on your list for you? And I'll ask you this question. And the reason why I say this can be difficult can be interpreted in many different ways. Like, at least on the list online, I've noticed that you still haven't hit a hole in one.
Oh, yeah.
But that may be technically the most difficult. But for example, you talked about performance anxiety in public. So perhaps for you, the most difficult thing in a different sense of difficult was when you were singing in the subway, as an example.
Yeah. I mean, they're all a challenge. I would say we're hitting a hole in one. I've hit over 10,000 shots now and I haven't got it in. So that's maybe technically difficult for sure.
Yeah.
One that I disliked, I loved it, but it was so hard, was staying awake for 72 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, it was disgusting, and I wouldn't advise anyone try it. It's horrible.
What did you do to keep yourself awake for 72 hours, by the way?
A lot of people say, were you drinking coffee? Were you doing drugs? No and no. I think I might have had like a cup of coffee or something, but no, I did it with a friend of mine, Dave Cornthwaite, who's an adventurer. And we just lined up an itinerary of 72 hours of things to do. We co-hosted a radio breakfast show. We played wheelchair basketball with the Australian Paralympic team. We went speed dating. We did tons of stuff. But it was really, that was hard. I think generally, I think goals that involve other people are harder as well, because you know, if it's just up to you, if it's just up to me, if it's just up to the individual, you go for it, you give it everything and you do everything, you be tenacious and aggressive and get there, right? But as soon as you're kind of reliant on other people coming to the party, just naturally it slows down. I'm trying to think of a fun example of that, but I wanted to kiss a celebrity.
Oh yes, yeah.
And it was a goal that took a long time. You know, I had to wait for a celebrity to kind of be into the idea. And, you know, it ended up being Sharon Osbourne. And she, you know, is a grandmother. And it just circumstantially, I was speaking at the same event as her. And I just asked her when she was on stage in her Q&A in front of 1,000 people whether she'd like to kiss me. Or I didn't say that. I said, I have a list of 100 things and number 64 is kiss a celebrity. Would you help me? And she said, yes. So, I mean, that was hard too. But I don't know. They're all tricky in different ways, you know. For sure. I had a boxing match. Speaking of fighting, your background. Oh my God.
How was that, by the way?
Oh, I've never been punched in the face so much. In fact,
had you ever been punched in the face prior to the boxing match?
I'd never been in a fight. I'd never, again, like this clean, sheltered upbringing. I'd never got anywhere near trouble. And
how much sparring did you do prior to this boxing match, by the way?
I trained for 9 months.
Okay.
I trained for 9 months. As a really good friend of mine. He's a great boxing coach called Simon Mitchell in Sydney. He trained me up. And this other guy actually called Jonathan Duna as well. But anyway, I trained for 9 months and started from scratch. Didn't know how to throw a punch. Didn't know anything. And then I got a lot better in 9 months. And then as soon as the bell rang, I just ran around the ring like a windmill, just throwing as many punches as I could. It was crazy. It was so I mean, if you saw it, it'd be embarrassing.
I saw there was a short clip somewhere, maybe on your Instagram or something. I saw just a short clip. But I don't know if you selectively chose like the little 5-second clip or whatever it was. For that 5 seconds, you didn't look terrible. I'm gonna throw that out there.
Or there is a fight. I don't know if it's the same clip, but he actually I knocked him down. But many people say he slipped, which is probably more accurate. As he slipped, I think I happened to touch him and it looked like I got him down. But yeah, it was, oh man, that was tough. My God. As I said, so much respect to you for doing what you do.
That's too funny. Well, I'll say this about staying awake for 72 hours. You should have probably done that one in Vegas when you got married. Like, it's like, where are better places to do that?
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny you say that. I actually tried with a friend before I ended up doing it in Sydney later on. We tried. We were very unprepared. We actually went there for a party and we went through the night and I said, Maddie, this is actually on my list. Let's try and stay awake for another 2 days. And we made it like another 5 hours and that was that. So it was a second attempt.
What was the aftermath of staying awake for 72 hours?
Just to put this into perspective, we woke up at 8 a.m. on Sunday and were allowed to sleep at 8 a.m. on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Right. And so 8 a.m. on Wednesday came and I found it hard to sleep at first, but I slept that entire day well into the night. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I value sleep now so much. I wear this Aura ring. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Aura rings.
Yeah. Seen them.
So I value sleep and I'm trying to improve it. So yeah, as I said, I wouldn't do it again. I think there's so much. Yeah, I don't know. I felt like I was exhausted for another couple of weeks afterwards, you know?
Yeah. You know, when I was looking at your list, for me personally, there are a lot of things on the list. Like there's some things on the list that a lot of things I have done. For example, I've never skydived naked. I will say this too, on your list online, cause you can, like, your list is at 100things.com. Was that what the website is?
Yeah. Or sebastianterry.com, whichever.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So you can go to 100things.com. I'm going to say this: in your skydive naked photo, you have a little thing that covers your nether regions.
Oh yeah.
Which is significantly smaller than the one you put on your posing for art nude photo. So there's some discrepancies on the nether region size, I'll say.
Yeah, I look, I'm not gonna lie to you. I exercise my creative license on that thing. If anyone ever sees the photos or video without the stars or the symbols I put over the top, just know this: it was a cold day.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the
day.
book. Sure. That was what was that? Was that are you a Seinfeld fan?
Yeah.
Remember the shrinkage? It was the shrinkage episode when they talked about. Yeah.
Exactly that. When I pose nude in the art class, by the way, I was going to tell a funny. There's a very funny story there. Let me tell you a funny story. When I skydive naked, the funny part about it was, of course, it was filmed. It was made. It was part of a documentary I was in. Then I had a premiere of that documentary, and I had some of my closest friends and family there. And I assumed that when they showed that, it would all be pixelated, and it wasn't. So everybody just got to see the nether regions. It was, I haven't spoken to anyone since. It was years ago.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's just bad form that they would do that to you.
I know. But hey, what are you going to do?
No, but on your list though, kidding aside, there were some things that actually got me thinking, because, sometimes I sit and think about things that, I mean, honestly, I've lived a life. Like if I was a cat, I've lived like 8 out of 9 lives already. I've had so many life experiences. I've been to over 65 countries. I've seen crazy things just culturally, and just with my professional career and being able to pursue passions and dreams in life. But there were a lot of things on your list that made me think. For example, going a week without talking. Tough. And one that I actually, when I was looking at your list, I'm like, I would actually like to try this. You stayed on a desert island for a full week by yourself.
Oh yeah, that was incredible.
Talk to me about this, man.
It's a common thought, right? All those what 3 things you take to a deserted island, and then you watch Castaway, and for me at least, I was like, oh wow, that would be phenomenal.
So you brought a volleyball?
No, I bought I bought a GoPro to kind of capture it, and what I found after 7 days on this island was that I was talking to the GoPro, not because it was recording, but just it was like a friend. So it was similar to Wilson, the volleyball.
Yeah.
But yeah, I again, the world shows up. I got an email from a complete stranger saying, hey, my dad has a resort in New Caledonia, and he knows of a cluster of islands that are uninhabited. It takes 2 hours on a fast boat to get out there. But he knows the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard says that if you fly to New Caledonia, he will happily give you a free ride to this desert island in the middle of the Coral Sea. And I just said yes. So I flew out there on a cheap flight. I flew out there with this girl who I didn't know, met her dad, and sure enough, he escorted me down to a boat wharf. I got on a Coast Guard boat, and we drove for 2 hours, whatever you say. Yeah, drove for 2 hours into the middle of the Coral Sea, and they just dropped me off. And that was that.
What kind of supplies and food did you have? Because I saw a picture of you on the island. It didn't look like there was much vegetation to live off of.
No, well, it wasn't really about the survival element for me. It was more the solitude. I'd just never been alone.
Yeah.
But so I did take some water. I took some emergency rations of food if I needed them. I wanted to try a bit of the survival stuff. There were coconuts on the island, so
nice, okay.
I only ate coconuts for 7 days, which was interesting. But yeah, I had a little hammock with a zip across the top, so it was like a cocoon. Mm-hmm. There were sea snakes all over the island. There were every single night, and I'm not making this up, there were sharks circling the island. I counted, I can't remember if it was 11 or 13 fins one evening, but it was nuts. And I was just by myself. It was, I'd always been in, I went from school to university. I played rugby, so I was surrounded by teammates all the time. And I just wondered, what would I be like if I was just by myself? And it was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah. That when I read that on the list, I was like, wow, this is not something I'd ever thought of before. And I was like, this is something that I think if I had a list of 100, because I've never really created a list. I've just gotten to the point now where when I decide I want to do something, I just go do it. I'm like, I'm going to go do this thing. But looking at your list made me think, you know what? I need some purpose-driven things. And the reason why is because when you don't, if you just do whatever comes, I'm like, a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to get my skydive license. So I went and got my skydive license. But, maybe there's some things, if I sat down and thought and started putting things on the list now, then there are certain things like that I wouldn't necessarily think of in the moment. Like, hey, I just want to go spend a week on a desert island. But down the line, I would force myself to do it if I had committed to it on a list type of thing. And so that's one of those things. When I looked at that, there were a couple ideas that you had that was like, what about, I'll switch gears here a little bit. The Olympic ski jump.
Oh yeah, well I haven't done that. That is going to stay on the list because I am fascinated by that. Just this idea of launching yourself off a 90-meter jump at that speed and just trying to land and not screw it up. So that's on the list. I'm not committing to it at this point in time, but I will.
But you do realize like the older you get, the worse that becomes for you in the event of like in a lack of success of accomplishing that the way that it's supposed to be accomplished.
Well, there's a few things I'll add just to support you. I can't ski. It's not much skiing though. It's more the landing I'm interested in, but maybe the skiing helps. So I need an instructor. I need to go and probably live on a ski slope for like, I don't know, a month or two. I'm not sure. So I'm really up for it. It's just a matter of timing as much of this is. But yeah, that is pretty petrifying. That does come from like this adrenaline seeking thing. It doesn't always go, but it still is one of those spokes, this adventure thing.
Yeah. How much time do you put into hitting the hole in one still?
I haven't hit in probably 6 months, but what I usually will go down to a golf course and I will say, hey, I'm trying to hit a hole in one. I've got this list of 100 things and I tell them sort of my story and they say, okay, cool. You can have it for 2 hours tomorrow morning on a quiet day. So I sit down there and I might hit 200 balls. So that's sort of how it works. The most I hit in one time was 1,100 balls and my hands were just torn to shreds at the end of that day. Yeah. And quickly, just back to what you said before about if you sat down and actually gave yourself time to come up with a list, you'd be really surprised at what pops up. And, again, for people listening or watching, it's such a great conversation to have we don't talk about that so much, It's such a great conversation to have as a family with your kids around dinner table. Hey, let's share some goals. What would be the number one thing you would love to do? What are the top 3 things? Let's write down a list. You become 42% more likely to achieve a goal by writing it down. Research out of Harvard suggests. And when you know what other people want to do, we naturally are problem-solving machines. So we think, I wonder how I can help that person do that. As I said, I've experienced that personally. So many people have helped me out. So this idea of sharing your goals is so important to the development of progress and also quote unquote community. I mean, my journey completely, it was completely selfish, just doing in a healthy way, doing all these things on my list. And then there was, like a turning point when people started sharing their lists with me. And I didn't ask for that to happen, but I ended up connecting with this guy, Mark, who I'm sure I wrote about in my book. And shall I tell this story?
Absolutely. You should.
Basically, I had given an interview on an Australian TV show and number 26 on my list is to help a stranger. That's all it read. So I said, if there's anyone who needs help with anything, let me know. This guy, Mark, emailed me the day after and he said he had 150 things on his list and he wanted me to shave his head. So I said, fine. So I got to Melbourne, Australia, where he lives, and I shaved Mark's head. And in the process of getting to know Mark, I noticed, of course, that we were different because Mark is a quadriplegic. His backstory is that he was completely able-bodied up until the age of, he was in his mid-20s. He was backpacking through Italy, got bitten by a tick, and got Lyme's disease and became a paraplegic because of that bite. So he can't move a muscle in his body. He cannot speak. He needs a ventilator to stay alive. He needs a 24-hour care team. It's grim. It's really awful. But having shaved his head, I saw how happy he was that he had done something that was important to him. Again, goals on a list, you don't have to have 100. You can have just one. And as long as it's meaningful, and it was meaningful to him. And then I sort of sensed that I wanted to do more. And I said, what else can I do? And Mark's carer told me that he wanted to complete a half marathon on his list. And I didn't know quite how I could help. And then he looked at me and he said, it was the first 2 words I've ever understood him say. We're now very good friends. He said, push me. And so I signed us up for the Melbourne half marathon. I went home to Sydney where I was living back then. I trained for a little while, went back down to Melbourne and pushed Mark to complete a half marathon. And it was the best thing I ever did. And there was a few people who helped us do it. There was some of his carers. My girlfriend at the time helped us out. By the end of the race, there was 20 people who had probably helped us, complete strangers, because we innately want to connect. we want to connect. We want to help each other out. We're just not sure how. And I just started realizing this at this point. And since then, I'm very proud to say I've gone and helped lots of people. But even better than that, far better than that, is that we've ended up being able to matchmake acts of kindness between complete strangers. And so, there's a million ways to go with this conversation, but maybe to try and put it succinctly from my end, this idea of, so a lot of people hear that story of me pushing Mark and they're like, you're such a nice guy. I was very kind. And it's not really that. It wasn't an act of service necessarily. It wasn't an act of charity. It was more so two people within a like-minded community had set goals and had committed to them and were willing to do them. And that we found that there was crossover. So it was more so a result of goal setting. That whole story is goal setting based. And so, it's important to goal set. It's very important to goal strive as individuals, but it's the goal sharing that it opens up opportunity to help each other out. And that's what 100 Things has become. And I love that. The sense of individual growth leads to kind of collective evolution. If a rising tide, what's that saying? A rising tide lifts all ships, or whatever it is. We do it together. We have a like-minded community, be it your family, your friendship circle, your business. If everyone is goal setting, striving, and sharing, we progress together. And that's such a wonderful thing that this journey's become.
When you put that do good energy in the world, like when that is part of your goals, you find that it becomes infectious with other people. My team and I, we were traveling in Indonesia. We were in Bali a few years back, and we worked with this organization that helped people that were handicapped, a lot of kids with cerebral palsy. And, we asked them like, well, what can we do? And they said, they love, like, the kids here love being active. And so, yoga was something we decided to bring. So we reached out and found this yoga instructor and said, hey, we would like for you to come to this facility and teach these kids yoga. So there were a lot of kids in the class, and in doing this thing, when we were done, the lady that had come in to teach yoga for us was so smitten by this experience that she says, well, I'm going to continue doing this once a month, for, I don't know, however long she committed to doing it, but she continued to go back to the facility and work with these kids. And I'm like, this is awesome, because when we were traveling, I would always tell my team, like, look for something good that we can do, like some sort of impact that we can make for people while we're down there. And when you put that out there, you find that other people, it becomes a community thing where, people want to help each other.
Yeah. It's infectious. I truly believe, I truly believe, like, as I said, we're innately wired and capable to help others. We're just not sure how, and given an opportunity to help someone, we will. And again, it comes down to knowing what that person needs. And that's goal setting again. And, we've helped. I mean, I have a reality show here in the US, or I had a reality show based all on helping people. And it was wonderful. People would come out of the woodworks to help complete strangers. We helped a US war veteran who lost a leg in battle learn how to ski, which was his dream. Two strangers helped that happen. We relocated a family who had no means, they had no money, across the US from Salem, Oregon to Colorado Springs, Colorado. 30 people helped that happen because their backstory was so compelling. 15 people unloaded their house into a van. 2 people drove for 22 hours to the new place. 15 more people packed their new house. We're in the process at the moment of looking for a kidney for someone, and it looks as though there's been a match. So a complete stranger is potentially going to donate her kidney to a complete stranger to save her life. I mean, I get emails from people. I get emails from people now, still, more so than ever, who are in a really bad space mentally with their mental wellness and health. And some of them are self-harming. Some of them are considering, the ultimate act of taking their life. But over time, with conversation and helping them to create a list, they've decided not to. And many of these people are now flourishing. Now, it doesn't mean they have to be world beaters. They don't have to land on the moon. They don't have to, win a trophy. They just have to do things that are meaningful. And you know, the science of goal setting and goal setting and goal striving is amazing. When we identify a goal and we go for it, we release dopamine and serotonin into the body. And I'm sure you're really aware of this, but you know, they're pleasure chemicals. So dopamine, it motivates us. It makes us feel great. It becomes very addictive. We want to continue to feel dopamine, and we get it from setting and striving for goals, no matter what they are. And similarly, serotonin reduces depression. It regulates anxiety. It gives us confidence. It makes us feel good. And we get these not only achieving these goals, but by writing them down. From the moment we write a goal down and all the way through the process of getting there, these chemicals are released. And so when we talk about mental wellness, again, I think it's very heavily dependent on identifying meaningful goals.
Speaking of achieving goals, I'm going to ask you this. On your list of all the things that you've done, what was the goal that brought you the least amount of satisfaction, where you were thinking like, after you did this, you were like, oh man, I was expecting more, like, and it just was kind of
so it's not a profound answer at all, but it was getting my fortune read. It was one of the first things I did. Very easy to do, of course. And I just did it with this lady who I don't think knew what I think she might have been like a dentist or something. She just didn't know how to read. It was just ridiculous. She said, I got in there and she said, who's Daniel? And I say, oh, I don't know a Daniel. So who's Tiffany? I don't know a Tiffany. She went on and said about 20 names. And then finally she said, who's Brett? And I said, oh, that's my sister's boyfriend. And she said, thank you very much. And I sort of sat there and looked at her. I was like, okay. And she just went through this bizarre routine that lasted an hour. The last thing I remember, I said to her, do you know when people are going to die? If you know the future, do you know when people are going to die? And she looked at me and said, 91 years old. And I said, I wasn't asking. I didn't want to know, but she just told me. So now there you go. I suppose that's a good life. But anyway, it was a weird one. So I left just thinking,
yeah. A 91 beats the odds, really. So it's like,
yeah. So I'm just going to have a big year of 91 every night, every day.
Is your list that's online on your 100things.com, is it accurate?
Well, it's accurate for now. Like, for example, though, having just yesterday decided that Start a Tradition is going to go on there, I haven't updated it. So I'm in the.
But you don't have learn foreign language, like you were learning French. I thought, what happened? Yeah,
it's on there. It should be on there.
Yeah, but it's not crossed out.
It's not crossed out. No. It's funny actually. It's somehow in the editing process. In my book that you've read, it says that it's achieved. It's not achieved. That's a long process for me. So it's still on there. It's not. I haven't completed it. I haven't completed it at all.
Gotcha. And then there's other goals like, so you bicycled across Cuba, right?
Yeah, bicycled across Cuba. I rode even more interesting than that. I rode a tandem bicycle I wanted to do an extreme bike journey. So I booked my first ever international keynote presentation in Las Vegas, and I was living in Sydney, and they said, well, we'll fly you to Las Vegas. And I said, no, why don't you fly me to Vancouver? So me and a friend, Dave Cornthwaite, same guy I mentioned earlier, we rode a tandem bicycle from Vancouver, Canada to Las Vegas, which was hilarious. Took 14 days. We had a crash. We were snowed in. It was crazy. That was a fun time.
Nice. Yeah. It's, the list, man, this list that you've done it's a beautiful thing. And so
is that a road bike behind you? Are you doing a bit of that?
This is a specialized tarmac that I have behind me actually. And so I just, I put some things on my set here. Like I have a climbing rope. I have a snowboard back there, my Hall of Fame trophy. I got some books that I'm into, including my Bible and, just different things. A backpack, it kind of represents like things that I'm into. And, and so I'll tell you a funny story about this bike. Cause nobody ever asks about what's on your set.
Yeah.
So a buddy of mine says to me one day, he's like, hey, I want to, let's bicycle across the country, across the US. And I was like, okay. So like within days I went out and bought a bicycle. And this is a nice bike. It's a good, if you're a serious rider, this is a good entry level serious rider bicycle. And, and I'm not a serious rider. And I thought, but I can make myself a serious rider. I'm not even built like a bicycle rider, like this is not an easy task for me. And then he went out and bought himself a mountain bike. And I looked at him and I said, you're going to ride across the country on this thing. And then he just ended up like it faded with him. So he I ended up with this bike. And so I'll ride it from time to time for exercise. But the idea of riding across the country was not necessarily my particular goal. I was just willing to do it if I had an able and willing party to do it with me, so to speak, which is funny because talk about walking across the country. I just recently finished helped a guy walk across the United States who was a cancer survivor. He had Ewing sarcoma cancer at the age of 14, diagnosed, went through this whole thing, told he would never be able to walk again, and then decided that he was going to walk across the country and prove the medical community wrong. And just completed that just a few weeks ago. So I was recently out in Santa Monica. It's pretty cool. The city of Santa Monica shut down Colorado Avenue, the street that leads into the pier, shut it down. We had an escort with police that were on horses and mountain bikes and the city mayor showed up. Fire departments were there. It was really cool, really cool.
I wish I had known you. I would have come up and supported. I'm just down the road in Venice.
Yeah, I thought about that when I read about you because you walked across France, and I was like, man, yeah, that would have been a good connection at that point in time. But yeah, he just finished. I don't know, 3 weeks ago or something, and started last year, June 17th.
Wow, well, that idea of helping people, like what you've done there, and obviously the conviction of that particular gentleman as well. It's wonderful. It's inspiring. It's just so nice to hear that.
That's the thing. It's because it's interesting, talking about your list and how things change in your spokes, and over time, different things change, and you can see that more on a smaller level, like a micro level with something like the walk. Because when he first started out, we were doing calculations mathematically of how many miles you could cover in a day, and there's kind of this over under because he was paying for this all out of pocket. I financially helped him a little bit, but there's this over under on how much you can actually afford, because the longer it takes you to complete something, the more you have to eat and the more you have to, because he had a friend that drove across country basically following him as a tether, and he basically got to a point where it's like, it's not about covering distance, because initially it was about covering distance and getting across the country. But it's like every community that he went to, he started making connections and started making more impact. Like he began to stop and say, I'm going to stop at this children's hospital. I'm going to walk with these kids this day. Right. And so the walk ended up taking much longer, but like he said it became not about the destination, but about the impact of the walk. And that was truly a beautiful thing about that. So it was pretty cool. And tons of stories along the way, how things ended up working out and people buying food for him and good stories.
Yeah. And I think it seems like every one of these stories that, we're talking about today, and, every story that we kind of hear about in general, they all have like a similar kind of narrative, right? It starts off with one person, then they collect people along the way who are inspired or feel compelled to help them or whatever. And then, the end of the story is it's the greater good. It's the greater good. It's the community. It's not to be, it wasn't the matter of getting to Santa Monica necessarily. It was everything that happened before that was powerful. And I don't know. It's just wonderful to get reminded of that by sharing and having this conversation.
Well, listen, I'm going to offer my help on any of these goals that you want to accomplish that I could help with. I think I could be helpful in the ultimate prank goal, number 61, which you haven't completed yet, because we could take one of your friends and I could pretty much just scare them to death. Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking like, Oh,
yeah.
Maybe I'm in California and we're at a bar and then you bump into me and blame it on your buddy. And then I turn around and you're like, bro, do you know who this is? Like, you just pissed off the wrong guy type of thing.
Yeah. I know the exact friend I'd like to do that to, actually. His name is Tweety, and that'd be brilliant.
You have several on the list still that are for sale for Make-A-Wish. Is there a price on those, or is it an auction? What's the deal with that?
I actually had 90 goals and then 10 of them were unlisted. So the remaining 10 were unlisted. And so there's no price on them, but people occasionally say, hey, can I give you money to choose what you do? And then I give that money 100% to the charity. So over time, I think 4 spots have been, I never promote it. So it's actually really interesting that you'd even noticed it. But over time, I've had someone donate $10,000 and all they wanted to do was help me volunteer for Camp Quality back in the day. That was it. Someone else paid $5,000 to do the same thing. So I can't remember what the other two were, but there's no self-gain out of that. And we got to do some pretty cool stuff, which is great.
Well, I'll tell you what, on your list, if there's anything I could do where it would entice somebody to make a donation that involved me
Great.
to help one of those, I would be more than happy to lend my time for that. So let me know.
You're too kind.
Anything I could do to help you accomplish any of these other goals. I would say one of the goals you didn't put on there is be challenged by a world champion. You challenged a world champion, but you didn't get challenged by one. So you want to add that. You want to add that to your list. I'll challenge you right now. All right.
I'll take you up on the challenge. I don't know what you're challenging, but I'm in.
Well, I'm a world champion in mixed martial arts, so that's all I got for you. I'm not challenging you to a pie eating contest.
I would like to have a pie eating contest with you, and I would love to have a fight with you. But obviously, you can't hurt me. That would be the only thing. That'd be the only thing.
Well, listen, I'll tell you this much: I won't hurt you as much as a failed ski jump will hurt you. How about that?
Oh, I tell you what, I made the mistake of Googling ski jump fails.
Yeah,
I am scarred mentally. I mean,
dude,
yeah, that's
when I saw.
By the way, I think you could hurt me as much as that. By the way,
by the time you hit the end of that ramp, I can't even imagine what speed you're going when you launch off that ramp, and being able to handle ski, snowboard. I don't care whatever speed you're coming down a hill. Like I can snowboard. I live in Ohio, so that's my disclaimer. Like I'm a decent snowboarder for an Ohio guy. But you get to a point where when you're coming down a hill at a certain speed, I'm like, man, this makes me nervous before you actually hit the air. So good luck with that one. And you're not getting younger, man.
Hey, I'll let you know. Mate, thank you so much for spending time and giving me time and chatting.
No, listen, I appreciate your time.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Quite Franklin is providing this podcast as a public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor legal advice, nor a statement of Quite Franklin policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation of that product or entity by Rich Franklin or Quite Franklin. The views expressed by guests on the podcast are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by Quite Franklin employees or representatives are the views and opinions of the persons expressing them, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Quite Franklin or any of its officials or principals. Nothing heard on this podcast at any time is medical advice or is intended as medical advice. The listener must always consult his or her personal physician or other qualified medical professional regarding any questions of a medical nature. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact our general counsel.